We appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you and talk a little bit about our smart sensor solutions. Primary to the development of any solution with regards to the lighting controls, we really need to take a step back and really kind of reorient or refamiliarize ourselves with the energy code requirements. And within the United States, we pretty much have a big three of energy codes that we work with. One being the California Title 24, which is currently in the 2022 version. We also have ASHRAE 90.1, which is also in the 2022 version. It is in the 2022 version, but we do acknowledge the fact that sometimes some of the municipalities are actually a code cycle behind, whereas you might find some of the municipalities actually enforcing the 2019 ASHRAE 90.1. And then of course IECC, the International Energy Conservation Code. The IECC is interesting because a lot of the different states are still actually all the way back on the 2015 IECC. Then we'll find many more of the states being currently focused on the 2018 IECC, and then of course the states that are the most up to date are actually already incorporating the 2021 IECC. One of the things that we really want to make certain that you understand as well, that although within your area, within your jurisdiction that you do the work, your city, your state, or the area that a specific authority having jurisdiction is operating, they might be on the ASHRAE 90.1, they might be on the IECC, they might be on Title 24. Really want you to understand that Leviton as a company really has the ability not just to support you on the code that you currently operate within, but we're becoming more and more aware that certain specifiers are designing outside of their current jurisdictions. For instance, we might find an engineer in California that day to day is using Title 24 as their standard, but as more and more of the specifiers merge and as more and more of the specifiers work outside of their immediate territory, we also understand the importance of supporting you not just on the code that you're currently designing to, but the other codes. So if there's ever any of the codes that we can support you with, in addition to the one that you work with on a day-to-day basis, we really welcome that opportunity as well. But what we're going to really focus on throughout this time is to really familiarize all of you with what the actual code requirements are, be it the IECC, be it ASHRAE 90.1, or be it Title 24, and then show you how, as we develop our solutions, we really have that at the forefront of what the solution has to offer for you. As codes become more and more complex, the solutions really need to stay in step with those. And as a whole, we don't want to design a solution that is great for one energy code, but falls short in one of the others. So presentations are definitely available for each of these codes that we're currently talking about. Here's kind of an example of the United States, and we're kind of looking at all of the different states. We see areas where IECC and ASHRAE 90.1 are enforced. We see other areas where actually, if you look at those blue states, those are actually home rule states. And then there's even the states still, that are a couple of them out there that are really have no true standards enforcement. Then you go all the way up to the top there and you see up in the upper left-hand corner, Washington, the blue state. Believe it or not, currently, Washington State is the most stringent of all of the energy codes. Of course, California being along the coast there, and Title 24 being the code that's enforced throughout that state. If we really look at the energy code as a whole, we really have specific areas that we're trying to address when we are looking at the control requirements for lighting controls. First being automatic shutoff. Well, what does automatic shutoff mean? Well, technically, the automatic shutoff portion of the code states that every light in the facility, and again, when I say every light, the change that took place way back in the 2013 code cycle with both ASHRAE and Title 24, and then I believe it was in the 2015 version of the IECC, they actually now removed the ability to have night lights. Now, in the state of California, with Title 24, it will allow for, currently under the 2022 code, it will allow up to 0.1 watts per square feet of light that would remain on at all times. So you could call that night lights. Okay. Also, the other thing that is an exception for automatic shut off is any area that you would have a panel, an electrical panel, or any other panel that would need to be worked on. Okay, and the way we classify that is any panel that would require clearances in front of it for the purpose of allowing someone to work on it safely. In those environments, actually, the code does not require automatic shut-off. Okay, it does allow for the space to be set up in a way that will simply be an on-off switch. But for the most part, 2021 IECC, and we're going to focus on the current versions of it, 2021 IECC, ASHRAE 90.1, the 2022 version, as well as the Title 24 Part 6, the 2022 version of that. All of those codes actually have specific areas within the project that is mandatory occupancy sensor. Now, you have other portions of a project that can be time switch, where you would use a lighting control panel or a room controller of some sort that would have time switch capability within it. And so as we designed these solutions, we really focus in on the fact that we really want to maintain the ability to meet this specific code requirement in a way that would be conducive to how that space is going to be used. And that has a lot to do with why you have mandatory areas and why for occupancy sensor versus areas that will allow for time switch. Now, keep in mind, any area that is not mandatory occupancy sensor does have the ability to be set up as a time switch, of course, but it does not make it mandatory to use a time switch. In other words, what I'm trying to say that all spaces within a given facility or a given project can use occupancy sensor, or I should say sensor technology, to actually accomplish the automatic shut-off requirements of the code. Now, one of the other things that we'll be talking about is the difference between what's called occupancy sensing versus vacancy sensing. You know, a lot of people, we don't want to take for granted that everybody understands what that means. Occupancy sensing is when a person would enter a space, the sensor would sense that the area is now occupied, and as such turn on the lights. Vacancy sensing, on the other hand, also sometimes referred to as manual on, when a person enters the space, nothing happens. That person has to actually reach down, press the button on the wall, the switch on the wall, the station on the wall, and the result would be then the lights would turn on. The actual sensor itself operates when the room is vacated, and as such the name vacancy sensor. When that room is vacated, the sensor then senses that the room is no longer occupied, and as such then turns the lights off. Okay, and there's a lot of opinions about that. A lot of people love the fact that they walk into the room and the lights turn on. Energy codes have looked at the idea of vacancy sensing as a opportunity to make sure that the lights are not turning on, that you don't have any false ons triggered, so you want that manual on. But one of the things that we'll be discussing as we're going through these different solutions also is the term partial on. Now, keep in mind that any of the energy codes, again, being ASHRAE 90.1, the International Energy Conservation Code, or Title 24, all three of the big three will allow for any time that a vacancy sensor is specified for a partial on sensor to be used instead. Now, why is that important? Well, tests have shown actually that if a person enters a room, enters a space, and the lights turn on to, say, a 50% level, the majority of the time they're fine with that level. They can operate, they're very comfortable. at that level. If not, they can reach over and turn the lights on, raise the lights and, or lower them. Still they have the ability with the multi-level control to adjust the lights. But the key to understand is, because of the fact that that light is always only turning on to the 50% level, and as such a lot of times being left at that level, the tests have truly shown that it does in fact save a substantial amount of energy in the long run. So again, as we've developed these solutions, all of them have had not only a occupancy sensor solution, a vacancy sensor solution, but also a partial on. And one of the other things we'll talk about with regards to the automatic shutoff, they also have what's called a partial off solution. Now you ask, why would we possibly need a partial off solution? Well, let's look at this application. Let's look at the application where we have a vacancy sensor, and that person is sitting in their office and they are reading for some reason and they're not quite moving enough. Well, all of a sudden the lights turn off on them. Well, in a vacancy sensor application, they would need to then stand up, walk over to the wall and push the button. Yes, I know, it doesn't seem like a big thing, but when a person has to do it every day or multiple times a day, they get quite frustrated. So one of the very, very great features of the partial off is that, let's say all of the codes as well, like I said, all of them have the automatic shutoff, and all of them with regards to sensor control have the maximum time of 20 minutes. Well, let's say if we have that sensor set up to shut off at 20 minutes, well, we could actually use the partial off feature that when you get to, say, 19 minutes, the lights in the room would drop down to a level of, say, 30%. As such, the person in the room would know, hey, I better move my arms, or I better move in some way to actually keep these lights on. So that's just one of many applications. So again, the four things we need to be concerned with automatic shutoff. Again, we'll look at first the trigger, occupancy, vacancy, or manual on. The third being partial on, which again would save energy. The fourth being partial off. Those are all designed into these technologies that we'll be talking about. About manual space control. Well, all of the codes, again, all three of the big three, do have the requirement for manual space control at some level or another. All of them have the requirement that all lighting must have an on and off switch. Okay. Now you say, well, why would it need an on and off switch if it already has an occupancy sensing? Well, we're trying to accomplish a different thing with the on-off. The on-off basically has the ability then, when I leave the space or when I'm operating within the space and I don't need the lighting, it gives me the opportunity to turn it off. Now, one of the things that we really need to make sure that we understand is that every fixture within the facility, again, with Title 24, you do have a ability to have 0.1 watts per square foot that is not controlled by a manual switch, but every light in the facility needs to have the ability to be turned on and off. Okay. Now, understand, because of the fact that it's understood that there is some areas within the facility where that might be a safety concern, the code also allows and brings attention to the fact that there's two types of manual control. The first being readily accessible is the term that's used. For a switch to be readily accessible, it needs to be able to be accessed without having to get on a ladder or move something or unlock something. And that's key to any area that's used as a general area that a general employee of the facility or a general occupant of that facility. However, in public areas, the code does make considerations that in those areas, a readily accessible switch may be a safety hazard. And as such, in those areas where, again, areas that are able to be accessed by the general public, there is code considerations for those that allows for what's called a non-readily accessible. And what that would be is the simple example of a key switch or a fork switch, something as simple as that. Or even maybe you might have a janitor's closet within a restroom area, and instead of having the switch right in the open area in a multi-stall restroom, you would then put the switch inside of that janitor's closet, or maybe even a hallway that would have a janitor's closet or some other type of closet type cabinet where you would put the switch in, or of course key switches also. So again, the idea that I do have an on-off switch for those areas, but the key to actually making it safe is they are not truly readily accessible to the general public. The other topic that I want to make sure we cover and that needs to be taken into consideration as we look at these different solutions or develop these different solutions is actually receptacle control, sometimes referred to as plug load control. Now, currently, as we are up to date, both ASHRAE 90.1 and California Title 24 Part 6 have required plug load control ever since the 2013 code cycle. With regards to the International Energy Conservation Code, that has just been instituted into the 2021 IECC. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that we mention on the IECC, the International Energy Conservation Code, is the IECC is actually a template. It is not truly an energy code. It's a template that allows the municipalities or authorities having jurisdiction to customize their energy code, gives them a basic format, as I said, a template. It allows them to customize it to what works for them in their particular state or their particular area of a state, even in some states. It goes by a localized area having jurisdiction. That being said, some of the states or some of the areas that have adopted the 2021 IECC have not required the plug load control. They've actually chosen to leave that out of their code requirements. But really what the code requirements are is that each of the codes, I'll use Title 24 as an example, that within 6 feet of each non-controlled receptacle, you have to have a controlled receptacle. ASHRAE 90.1 has a requirement that within a given space, 50% of your receptacles need to be controlled. And then 2021 IECC actually comes down to the point that I believe it's within a foot of the receptacle, you need to have a controlled receptacle. So again, that can be done either as independent duplex receptacles within the same box. So you'd put a 4-inch box in, and then within that 4-inch box you would have one duplex set of receptacles that would be controlled in another. Or as more and more we're seeing the standard, you would have a duplex receptacle which would have a single gang box, and then one of those receptacles would be controlled and the other one wouldn't be controlled. Well, let's kind of look down just a quick little overview of a table. This is a very simplified table, again with check marks, showing which codes require what. And obviously we see on this one automatic shutoff for all 3 of the codes. And again, occupancy sensing are required in a number of applications, and again that can be partial off, bi-level in some instances even, or auto off sensors, and then of course manual space control. All 3 of the codes do require that. In every area enclosed by wall with floor to ceiling, partitions must have manual control. And keep in mind, again, as I stated, controls must be located within the area served that the controls, or must be a remote switch clearly identifying the lights it controls with the status control. Now again, a lot of the codes different on this one, and a lot of the municipalities differ as to where they will allow you to have the switches actually within the room, or actually, as I pointed out, will allow you to have those external outside of the room or in an area that is not necessarily readily accessible. And of course, receptacle control being more and more the standard. Again, now with the 2021 IECC, the template itself calls for the receptacle control. But I want to make sure you understand some of the municipalities have not adopted that yet. Well, let's jump into our smart Wallbox sensor. Our smart Wallbox sensor, Leviton has been in the sensor business for quite a while, and we've had our standard Wallbox sensors, and then we stepped up with the Wallbox sensors, even where we've added the dimming. And now I truly believe we've done a tremendous job of developing a product that is quote-unquote code compliant in all applications. One of the things that when I begin discussing this, you will find that this smart Wallbox sensor is not just a great application in some smaller office areas, maybe 100 square feet, 200. But as we've developed this and are now, and also offer the multi-tech version of it, we've really kind of stepped above and beyond any limitations that we would find in any offices that would be, say, 500 square feet and less. So yes, I am truly saying this Wallbox sensor meets all of the energy code requirements on any office that you would find, or I would say the majority office that you would find, say 500, 400, 500 square feet or less. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, this new solution has the enhanced performance and capabilities that really we found as we did what's called voice of the customer. Those of you that are not aware of the fact, obviously Leviton's have been around for a couple of years, and along with that length of being in business, length of having a stellar reputation out in the industry, and a lot of what we design, a lot of what we develop is actually based on exactly that. Not just the energy codes, but what is it that the customer really wants? What is the customer really needs? Again, to not only to be code compliant, but actually to have something that they feel comfortable, that makes that space comfortable for them to work within. So we'll also talk about those topics. But with regards to this solution, definitely really have improved the aesthetics and design of the solution. A much nicer form factor. You don't have that bubble lens anymore. You have more of a streamlined look to the solution. And as I mentioned, that as far as being code compliant, we definitely need to have that occupancy sensing and vacancy sensing abilities with it. A standard 0 to 10 volt dimming version of it has been our mainstay up to this point, as well as a switching version of it. The initial rollout of this was just a passive infrared solution, but surprising to a lot of our customers that utilize this device, they actually found that the new digital passive infrared sensor that we're basically using in this, actually the minor motion ability, or capability I should say, of it far outweighed anything that some of the past technology have. So we actually saw this operating, even in some instances, even better than our previous multi-tech versions. And of course, that enhanced minor motion really assists for this device to be much more user-friendly in a lot of the environments that previously struggled with false offs using the passive infrared technology. The other thing we really focused on was easy programming and configuration. Now, of course, we want to have and we want to make sure that we're meeting all of the energy code requirements with an out-of-the-box default mode. That was one of the most important parts about it. We wanted to set it up so the feedback we got from our customers of, hey, this is the ideal settings that we tend to use these Wallbox sensors in, and then as such set it up with that. It is completely programmable with either an Android or Apple platform phone or tablet, or I should say smart device. You have a screen that steps you through all of the various settings that are necessary, and you have exact settings. It's not just guessing, or it's not trying to flip a bunch of dip switches, okay? But we found that there were some customers that really preferred not to have to use an app, and as such we came up with some convenient push button programming that talk a little bit about. Obviously, though, the best way to do that is with the app, and sets us apart from some of the solutions that our competitors offer. As we look at our various solutions that we have to offer with regards to the smart sensor technology, specifically with the Wallbox applications, we definitely understand the need for a multi-tech version of it, because the passive infrared truly does a great job in applications where you have a line of sight. But as we look at the various needs out there, we really realize that yes, there is definitely a need out there for not just line of sight, but also being able to sense occupancy within that space when that sensor cannot directly see the individual. And up to this point, Leviton's used in their multi-tech technology the ultrasonic technology, which we still will use in a lot of applications. But in this particular application, this particular solution, Leviton has used what's called microphonics. And those of you that are not familiar with microphonics, it has been around for quite a few years. However, as the technology to work with sound and use it as a sensing trigger, it's definitely increased in ability over the years. And one of the things now I prefer to refer to it as is frequency sensing versus just sound sensing. Because sound sensing obviously will have certain possibilities of having false triggers. Well, one of the things that we've looked at on this is really to tune the frequencies to what we refer to as human activity sounds. We don't want it necessarily to remain triggered just because the air conditioning unit or somebody in the next room over has made some type of a sound that would then false trigger the room. I want to make sure that it's actually tuned when we come across a time like in possibly an area with cubicles or a multi-stall restroom where it cannot truly have that line of sight. And again, we have it available in both dimming and on-off switching options. We have the 120-277 volt version of it that works with 0 to 10 volt dimming. And then we also have a 24 volt version of that. And one of the things we need to understand is both in our multi-tech version as well as our passive infrared version, not only do we have the 120-277 version of the 0 to 10 volt dimming, we also have a 24 volt version of it where the switching portion of the device is actually set up to switch at low voltage. Now you go, well, why would you want to do that? Well, in certain applications, we might have one fixture or the general lighting within the area operating on 277 volts. And then we might have possibly some pendant fixtures within the space or other decorative lights that operate at 120 volts. Well, as such, we could use two separate power packs to control the 277 one and then another one to control the 120. But even more, we can address the need for plug load control. Plug load control or receptacle control being the requirement by most of the codes at this particular point across the country. It will allow us now to put one power pack for the 277 load, put another power pack for maybe the 120 volt accent lighting, but then we can add an additional power pack or power packs to do plug load control in the area. So with that 24 volt feature, it really opens the door for a lot more flexibility and utilization of this particular device. But then we also have a 0 to 10 volt version of this that has phase cut dimming. What does that mean? Well, in some applications we've become aware that they are still using not just 0 to 10 volt, but also they are using two-wire dimming, which is often referred to as phase cut or forward phase dimming. And so we have developed a commercial solution for that using our multi-tech version platform. And then of course the switching. There still are those areas within a given project where you do want the multi-tech technology, but possibly, for instance, with Title 24, if the space is less than 100 square feet or less than 0.5 watts per square foot, you do not require multi-level control of the fixtures. Switching is a solution. So in those cases, we do have actually a cost-effective solution to have multi-tech technology with the simple using switching. A couple more things to overview with regards to this smart Wallbox sensor is this latest passive infrared technology accurately detects minor motion up to 400 square feet and major motion up to 1100 square feet. And this is really important. I had said this is a great application for anything that's 400 to 500 square feet. And that's where I think it's going to really shine. When you get up into some of the larger areas, you might have some challenges with some of the corners and things like that. But for the most part, this sensor is going to meet all of the requirements for smaller areas. And again, as I mentioned, the lens itself is now a tamper-resistant passive infrared lens, and the new multi-tech technologies are currently using the microphonic technology. As I mentioned, we can now add a power pack for controlled receptacle or plug load control with our 24 volt versions of either the passive infrared or the multi-tech solution. All in all, as I pointed out, this can be a solution to be used to comply with the International Energy Conservation Code, ASHRAE 90.1, and as well as Title 24. It's with the occupancy sensing, vacancy sensing, dimming, manual control requirements. All of these are in a simply packaged single gang device that is very, very cost competitive to the other stuff out there. And again, very well can be used within the restrooms and conference rooms and private offices and small lobbies, as well as meeting rooms. As I said, all of these areas, if you're looking at it, really any area that's 500 square feet or less it's a really, I would say, would be the sweet spot for this particular solution. And as I mentioned, we have the app. We'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. But for those of you that have customers or are a customer that prefer not to use the app, we do have convenient push button programming that meets all of the code requirements and allows you to set up in various configurations without having to use the actual app. The passive infrared version here that we're looking at, it has 8 different button pushes that allows you to have 8 different presets. In addition to that, we have convenient push button programming also for the multi-tech version. Because there's so much more to it, we actually have 12 presets that are available. So again, for those that do not want to use the app, we do have these push button programming solutions. But I really want to focus for a moment on the easy configuration of the Smart Sensor app and why it's such a great fit as a code compliant solution. With regards to code compliance, one of the things that we've seen a lot of the specifiers as well as the contractors that are really doing it right, they have developed what's called a sequence of operation for all of the various room types. And the biggest benefit of that sequence of operation is it sets standards that are in fact code compliant on how each of the different spaces are to operate. Well, once you have that information, it actually allows setup of the control system to go very smoothly. It is just amazing by how much smoother the setup of a given facility goes, the lighting controls for a given facility goes, when you actually have the sequence of operation, how you have an understanding of how that space is to operate. But the beauty now of having an app to set that up allows the contractor at the end of the project, whether it would be the installer or if they have a specialty person that actually does the programming of the devices for the overall project, gives them the ability to use an app to set up a given space. Now, one of the things that we have become aware of, all of us as a whole, is that a given project usually has maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 different room types. You really doesn't get far beyond that as far as similarity between spaces. As such, one of the things that we developed into this app is we allowed each of the spaces, as you set up a given space, you can then save those settings as a template. You then walk into all of the rooms that are similar and merely update that template, or upload, I should say. So once you have that template for a given space, you then enter any of the other similar spaces, and with a touch of a button, you simply upload the template into that sensor as well. So again, the beauty is you're not necessarily walking around and having to program each individual space. You're able to program each individual space type. And once you've programmed that individual space type, at that point you can merely upload it. Now, you would say, well, that's great, but wait, there's more, as the saying goes. Once a contractor has probably done about 3 or 4 different projects, they have all the templates that they'll probably need moving forward. And that template can not only reside within the smart sensor, but it can also reside on the individual's phone or tablet, whichever that they're using. And then they can also take that template and email it to other people. So other members of their staff can utilize that. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go through about the benefits of this app. But just understand, this app is phenomenal, because really what it's done is it's put on a very common device as a smartphone or a smart tablet, and it's now allowing them to interface that with the control device and make the programming as needed, then save the settings with a password to keep from others to get in to cause the problems with it. But it's a really great way to go. And the whole idea that they can not only program it, but they can actually rename the device on the app, as well as with any app you'd want to have the ability to adjust the sensor sensitivity, the range, the timeouts, as well as the daylighting. Now, one of the things you'll note on this particular Wallbox sensor is it will mention that it does have the capability to do daylighting. Now, we want to make sure that you understand what the capabilities of daylighting is for this particular smart Wallbox sensor family. The daylighting for this particular Wallbox solution is what's called hold-off technology. You say, well, wait a minute, John, that's something new. I haven't heard that before. What is hold-off technology? Well, hold-off technology, the best way I could explain that, let's say you have a room. That room has a beautiful window on the side over here. But you walk into that room in the middle of the day, that room has plenty of light coming in through that window. Well, what you would do is you would set up the hold-off technology that as long as that beautiful light is coming in from the window, that beautiful natural light is coming in from outside, the sensor will not turn on automatically. Okay, so if you have it in occupancy sensor mode and you walk in, it will actually hold off the lighting from turning on as long as the natural light within the space is at a certain level. Okay. However, let's use that same space. I come in the evening, or maybe as the sun is beginning to set, and that room does not have sufficient natural light. The hold off setting will then allow, as you come into the space, for that lighting to automatically turn on. But the challenge with hold off is it is truly not what's considered energy code compliant for daylight harvesting. One of the things we need to keep in mind as we're developing spaces, and this is something a lot of engineers struggle with as they begin dealing with daylight harvesting. A lot of engineers look at a given space and say, well, it's got a window, it's got daylight coming in, I need to incorporate the daylight harvesting zone within the space. Some of the codes having a primary zone and a secondary zone, some of the codes simply having a primary daylight zone. And in some applications, we might even have a skylight zone or a top lit zone. Well, one of the things that we need to understand is all of the codes have a minimum wattage that is exempt from the requirement for daylight harvesting. And what am I saying? Well, Title 24, for example, it does now in the 2022 version of it have a requirement for a primary zone and a secondary zone. However, if there's less than 120 watts of light in the primary zone or less than 120 watts in the secondary zone, or if the total between the primary and secondary zone is less than 240 watts, it does not require daylight harvesting. The latest version of ASHRAE 90.1 actually has taken that down to 75 watts in the primary, 75 watts in the secondary, and then 150 watts in both primary and secondary. So that all being said, as you look at your designs, the majority of the spaces that are, I would say, 500 square feet or less actually have well below those levels of wattage within the daylight zones. And one of the things I need to make sure we look at when we are looking at that wattage doesn't take into consideration any of the other lighting in the space that are not considered general lighting. The other nice feature of this device, the Smart Wallbox sensor, is not only does it have the dimming option, but it actually has nightlight options as well. And these nightlight options actually give you the ability to set where you would have the passive infrared sensor lens at. It actually allows you to change the color of that given space. But one of the most important things that I find is really, really important for all of you to understand is, as I mentioned, this device does have occupancy sensing and vacancy sensing mode. But in this compact solution, not only compact, cost-effective solution, we also, the dimming options also offer the partial on mode. Okay, so instead of vacancy, you might want to consider the partial on mode. Okay, or as I explained in previously, the code compliance of the partial off mode. In a lot of applications, for instance, the energy code might say, well, in these corridors, if the building is occupied, these corridors need to only turn down to a 50% level. And that would be an application where this solution would work, and that partial off mode can be used. And then, of course, a different partial off timeout than the standard timeout of the sensor itself. With regards to this solution, also, we do have the ability, if people don't want to see the LED indicator light to turn on and off, we have the ability to also disable that from turning on and off. Then, of course, password protection is something that's very important, and we understand that, and it does have the ability to save a different password than comes out as the standard from the factory. The smart Wallbox sensor is a great thing, but we understand that when we get to those spaces that are above what I call that 500 square foot area, that a wall sensor may not do everything you want it to do. That's where we need a ceiling mounted sensor. That is a ceiling mounted multi-tech occupancy sensor, right? As we take a step back, we go, is that really all this is? Well, as we've continued to develop and continued to look at ways to simplify the installation of a lighting control system within a given space, we've really come up with, I believe, one of the best solutions out there right now, and this being the ceiling mounted room controller. And again, having both the need to have a solution that is seeing not only sideways, but being able to look down upon the space and accomplish it, but do everything even above and beyond what a simple sensor would do. Because when we start looking at a ceiling mounted sensor, then we have to look at all of the different components that are part of that system. And one of the ways in which we have to look at that is to go, well, how about the power pack? Well, if it's truly a room controller with all of the components packaged together, then this would need to be within the room controller. So yes, our ceiling mounted room controller does have the power pack in it. How about the photocell? Well, we will have daylight harvesting in these larger areas. The lighting wattage with the general lighting wattage within the given daylighting zones will be above the trigger requirement for daylight harvesting. And then also the sensor technology, be it passive infrared or multi-tech, it needs to also be included. So what we're looking at, what we have here now, is a completely self-contained system with obviously less components but more features. And as we began talking, as I said, the voice of the customer on this, the feedback, we definitely said, wow, this would be great if this solution could use the exact same app as the Wallbox Smart Sensor solution. And that's what we moved forward with on this. So what we also understood is, as we're developing this, we will have the areas that will be 0 to 10 volt dimming requirement. Then we will also have areas where we just need switching. So as we developed the Smart Sensor ceiling mounted technology, we came up with a room controller that actually will do the 0 to 10 volt control as well as the true daylight harvesting. But then we also realized that there were certain code requirements that limited the control requirements to simple switching within a given space. And if we look at this, we're really looking at just 2 devices to meet all of the code compliance requirements in a larger area. And again, meeting that occupancy sensing, vacancy sensing. Having the 0 to 10 volt dimming ability with the smart room controller solution. And also having the partial on and partial off requirements met with the smart room controller. And then daylight harvesting also with the smart room controller. And then how about the switching abilities of the ceiling mounted sensor? Well, In the ceiling mounted sensor, we did include the ambient hold off technology that we have found very useful in Wallbox applications. But again, that is not the ability to dim the fixture. So the hold off does not meet the energy code requirements for true daylight harvesting. But in both of these technologies, we wanted to make sure that we were able to do the plug load control or receptacle control. In addition to that, the term demand response. Although the term demand response has been something that has been very common since 2013 with California Title 24, one of the newest places that we have seen the demand response, which is often referred to as load shed in other codes, in the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, it is now stating that in open office areas, when you are using networked controls, not the luminaire level lighting control, but the network controls, that you also have to have the ability to have load shed, or again, that would be the same equivalent to demand response. So we need to make sure we included that into the solution. And then one of the most exciting things that feedback we got from the customers is that this solution, in this type of environment, which is a little bit bigger again, we will have emergency lighting. And keeping in mind now, the challenge is we no longer have night lighting that is considered emergency lighting. We now have to control the emergency lighting just as we're controlling other lights in the room, which includes turning them off. As such, because we are now turning the emergency lighting off or allowing them to be dimmed down to lower levels, we do have to include what's called a UL924 shunt relay or emergency shunt relay in the actual applications that have those emergency lights. Well, the beauty of this solution is we've actually included that UL924 listing within this component, which is a tremendous benefit in these types of areas to have that actually designed into the component, because a UL924 shunt device, what it accomplishes is it actually bypasses the control. It doesn't switch the power. The switching of the power is a UL1008 device, but in these applications where we need to bypass the control on the emergency lighting and allow them to turn on to the level required in the event of emergency or power outage, this inclusion of the UL924 solution within this device is a tremendous feature that was in fact added to it. The other benefit of this, and again being code compliant, we need to make sure we cover the areas properly, is this will allow us to pair up to 5 of the smart room controllers or 5 of the ceiling mounted sensors. Again, understanding the big difference between them is a smart room controller is truly a completely dimmable, completely daylight harvesting, etc., where the ceiling mounted sensor is more of just in certain areas that just require the switching. But again, we can pair up to 5 of them together to end up with an overall coverage of 10,000 square feet with this technology. Also, we can do single and dual relay models. The other really nice feature of this smart sensor that I really want to make sure that we don't miss out on is we're seeing more and more applications where that project might have, where in the past an area might have been 8 to 10 feet. Now those areas can be anywhere from all the way up to 20 feet that we're dealing with the open beam ceiling. So one of the things that our design team has done, our product management team, is not only do they ship it with a lens installed that meets the 8 to 10 foot requirement, but every box, every one of these devices comes in the box with an alternate lens that will allow you to simply changing that lens out on the device will allow you to go all the way up to 12 to 20 feet. And again, as I said, that's not a different SKU number. Every box comes with that already packaged in it. One of my favorite features of this smart ceiling sensor, as well as the smart room controller, is the actual way in which it's mounted. This technology is just, as simple as it is just so wonderfully thought through. And again, one more time, the voice of our customer ringing true. What you do is you simply remove the cover, and you basically, which will expose some wings on the side of the device. Now that you see what those wings are, you can then pull those wings sideways, opening a much larger area on the mounting portion of the sensor. You then can take your screws, and instead of trying to balance them on a given screwdriver tip, you can actually put those screws into the box, screw them down a little bit in, just so they don't fall out, and then push the smart ceiling sensor or smart room controller over those screws. And then once it's in place, you merely move those wings back in, now holding the sensor captive on those screws, and then you finish tightening them down. So no more balancing of a screw at the top of a ladder, which any of you that have ever been up on a ladder and have dropped a screw understand how painful that can be. But to have that ability to have those little wings that pop out and go right over the screw head and then close back in is truly a wonderful feature. You know, with, again, as I mentioned, the most wonderful thing about these smart sensors being the smart Wallbox sensor that we covered, or the smart room controller, or the smart ceiling mount sensor. All of these are programmed using the same smart sensor app. So again, now with regards to our interior spaces, we've pretty much gotten a system where not only the Wallbox sensors, but all of the room controllers and the larger areas are also programmed with the exact same app. And one of the nicest features of this app for the smart room controller and smart ceiling sensor isn't just the ability to program the individual settings, but it actually has a scheduling feature. Now the scheduling feature, as I pointed out, is absolutely wonderful because not all spaces on a given project are mandatory occupancy sensor. There are a lot of the areas on a project where you might want to use scheduling of the lighting on off, when the lighting turns on and then when it automatically turns off with the scheduling. So this is a really, really nice feature with regards to something that we can do with this app. And again, the other benefit is the grouping and networking of the individual. Again, we can group up to 5 of these devices together to cover a much larger footprint than we can with the Wallbox sensor. And again, the last thing here, I don't want to minimize how important it is to have that ability to have these custom templates. Once you've set up one of the rooms, simply by saving that template, you can then go from room to room, and as we discussed, most projects have about 5, 4, 6 room types. You now have the ability to go into each of those room types and in less than a minute upload the settings into that. The beauty of those settings is, as we are currently seeing more and more specifiers, more and more contractors have their set sequence of operation for all of the room types. And as soon as you've got that sequence of operation, it becomes setting up of the space using this app much more conducive to a successful controls installation. You know, the other thing that we really need to come to terms with is the need, what we do for the switching. And one of the things that we've done a really good job on as we've developed this, and again, voice of the customer was instrumental on this, is a wireless companion switch as well as a wireless companion dimmer. Of course, we also have the wired version for the applications where they might not want the wireless applications. But all in all, we really have a wonderful way to expand and the ability to switch from various doors and various areas within a given space. Again, either using the wireless companion switch or adding the tried and true 1-button, 2-button, or 4-button low voltage keypads. And you know, this really easy way to add 3-way, multi-way control of a given space. Again, even more exits and entrances can be taken into consideration. Now, one of the terms that I haven't used yet that I really want to make sure that everybody understands that we have used is, we have a term that we use called Ladderless Commissioning. Yes, that is a trademarked saying that we have around here. And the whole idea behind Ladderless Commissioning is that you don't need a ladder to get up to the actual fixture or get up to the sensor to make changes. And one of the things that I want to point out is, as we've had these solutions for a little while in one of our solutions to use the template, one of the contractors that we were working with actually brought up a really good point. He said, John, this template thing is great. We can set it up, we can upload it, but actually the best thing about this app is that we often will get calls from our customers to come back a month or two after we're done to, readjust the sensitivities and all. He said on a given project, we had an office manager that called us and said, hey, we need you to come out. We need you to reprogram these, these sensors because they're not working right. Well, normally I would send my guy over there and he'd make his notes and we'd come back and, after hours. But he said, on this particular application, had a guy working up the street, so I had him take off a couple hours earlier. He went over to the space, walked the space with the office manager, and as I mentioned, normally we would then have to schedule our guy to come back after hours so he could then bring a ladder into the space and then make the adjustments on the actual sensors, because he can't bring a ladder in when people are working in the space. However, in this particular case, because the app was available, he was able to walk room by room with the office manager and make all of the adjustments real time. And the ability to make those all real time saved us all a tremendous amount of time and money, because we didn't have to do any of it in overtime hours. Again, this ladderless commissioning doesn't include you just adjusting the sensitivity. It will allow you to adjust the scheduling. It'll allow you to redo the grouping or networking, as well as saving additional templates. Again, understanding that template does reside within the device and can be also reside within the phone or tablet that was used to program it, and then can also be emailed to as a file to whoever else wants to use it. If we compare that then to the smart ceiling sensor, the benefits of the smart ceiling sensor to the smart room controller is that the smart room controller actually does now have the 0 to 10 volt dimming. It does have now code compliant daylight harvesting, as well as the partial on and partial off features. It also features the receptacle control requirements that will be required by a lot of the controls, as well as the demand response, or as we talked about, as the other code now has the requirement for the open office areas or other larger areas where you're using networking in the International Energy Conservation Code. Those areas now also require the load shed if you're using networking instead of luminaire level lighting control. But you'll find the same UL924 shunt relay in it that is truly UL listed for that application. And then, as we mentioned, the ability to group up to 5 of them together to get a total coverage of 10,000 square feet. And that same ladderless commissioning, but the ladderless commissioning to adjust not only the other sensitivity things, but as we pointed out, the partial on and partial off settings, as well as all of the daylight harvesting settings that we would have. I'd like to take a quick moment and just go through this table with you. Now, as we look through this table, we have various features that are the code compliant requirements of all of the different energy codes. And as we want to look at all of these requirements, these code requirements, well, let's look at them with regards to the smart ceiling sensor or the smart room controller. Okay, well, again, occupancy sensing and vacancy sensing, the auto on, the manual on, the automatic shutoff, both of these devices can accomplish that. How about the 0 to 10 volt dimming? Well, the smart room controller does allow for the 0 to 10 volt dimming. However, the smart ceiling mount sensor only allows for switching of the lighting on and off, which in certain codes, such as Title 24, any room that's less than 100 square feet or less than 0.5 watts per square foot, does not require the multi-level control. So, and it's becoming more and more standard. We're seeing more and more spaces that are being designed at less than 0.5 watts per square foot. And the daylight harvesting, well, again, the smart room controller does allow for true energy code level daylight harvesting. However, the smart ceiling mount sensor will only allow you to do ambient light hold off. Partial on and partial off, well, that is a feature on that smart ceiling mount sensor device. And again, we discussed partial on being compliant with any times when you have a requirement for a vacancy sensor. That partial on sensor will do that. And then also a lot of the codes now have a partial off requirement. So as such, the smart ceiling mount sensor will in fact meet those requirements. And receptacle control, well, both the smart ceiling mount sensor as well as the ceiling mount sensor itself that does not have the dimming, both of them will have the ability to do receptacle control. Demand response, or again, as I pointed out, often referred to as load shed. Both of the devices will allow for that. How about the UL listed for emergency lighting? Well, both of them will do that. Both the dimming version, the smart ceiling mount room controller, as well as the sensor itself, it will allow for that. As well as not only zone control, but true to zone control can be accomplished using the smart ceiling mount sensor or the smart ceiling room controller. How about single relay and dual relay models, including the interchangeable lenses and aisleway masks? They will do either, and both of them will also allow for that and come standard with the interchangeable lenses and aisle masks. And again, as I pointed out, available in 450 square feet or 2,000 square feet. You know, as the table shows here, these are available in 450 square feet all the way up to 2,000 square foot coverage patterns. And that ladderless commissioning with the smart sensor app. That ladderless commissioning saves the knees from running up and down on a ladder, but more so allows you to do work in a given space during normal business hours where you don't have to run up and down. You bring a ladder in and be worried that any kind of safety concerns with that. You know, as one of the key features on this is that we can configure the smart technology sensitivity and the timeouts using the app, which would include also scheduling. Scheduling is a big part of this because, as I pointed out, not all areas require the occupancy sensor controlled, and as such, scheduling is a very nice feature that both of the solutions can offer. And then again, one of the things that allows this to be used in areas all the way up to 10,000 square feet is that both of these solutions can be paired or networked with up to 5 units together. So 5 smart room controller solutions or 5 smart ceiling mounted sensors can be grouped together to expand the field of view. Again, one of the things that we talked about is this app allowing for custom templates. And again, the things that makes these custom templates such a great feature is that not only do you have the ability to program and save, but you have the ability to program to a set sequence of operation, which is becoming more and more common, and then use that as the standard moving forward on all projects that the contractor is working on. And finally, the wireless companion switch or dimmer to control the loads wirelessly. As we're seeing more and more offices built with glass walls, or more and more applications where we might have walls already put up or we can't fish wiring down into a wall, the wireless companion switch or dimmer really helps round out the requirements for the multi-location switching or multi-location dimming for the smaller ceiling sensor room controller or smart ceiling sensor, the switching version of it. You know, as a whole, I love this graphic because it shows us the 3 devices. We have the app, of course, that ties it all together, keeping in mind same exact app for the Wallbox sensor as well as the ceiling mounted smart sensors. Then we have the station, and then we have the room controller or smart ceiling sensor all in one. But let's go through this real quick, looking at the individual devices. Number 1, we definitely have shown you, or we definitely need to understand that this can in fact be used to comply with all 3 of the major energy codes, IECC, ASHRAE 90.1, as well as Title 24. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is this device is actually integrated occupancy sensor or vacancy sensor, photocell, power pack, all in a self-contained device. The other feature is that it's completely standalone, networkable, as well as wireless, as well as in its ability to be used within the space. And then, as we pointed out, it does have occupancy sensing and vacancy sensing ability. It does have the room controller version, does have 0 to 10 volt dimming, as well as the partial on and partial off abilities. It does have on-off switching only with the ceiling mounted sensor, as well as the daylight harvesting with the smart room controller, and then the ambient light hold off feature with the ceiling mounted sensor. And then one of the things we need to be aware of is this does not only do daylighting control or daylight harvesting, this device also offers for automatic closed or open loop daylighting control. And then of course we have the receptacle control and the demand response control, or as is some referred to in some codes as the load shed requirement. In addition to that, we have the UL 924 listing within this device, which is a tremendous feature all in one package. And then we also have single and dual relay models, including 2 interchangeable lenses and aisle masks. And those interchangeable lenses make it able to be used in rooms that are either 8 to 12 or simply by changing the lens going from 12 to 20 feet. Now, how about the app? Well, the app is really a system fine-tuning adjustments from the palm of your hands. I love that thought, because really that whole idea we talk about often of the ladderless commissioning with the Smart Sensor app. That really is a lot. Anybody that's run up and down a ladder and tried to balance a screwdriver or have to have a light on their forehead to properly see what they're doing within a ceiling mounted sensor and have to do that often in overtime hours understands the benefits of being able to come in during normal business hours and make the adjustments without ever having to step up on a ladder or step stool. And sensing the sensor technology, just keep in mind with all of these solutions, especially the multi-tech, if I'm wanting it to be passive infrared only and I'm installed the multi-tech version, I can in fact turn off the microphonic, or if I only want it microphonic only, I can in fact turn off the passive infrared. And this app also gives me the ability to select auto on as well as the auto on, or as we talked about, the manual on, auto off, which would be called vacancy sensor. I can configure all of the sensor settings with it, and I can also enable that partial on or partial off technology that the code either requires or allows for in certain areas. And with regards to the daylight harvesting, that is something that often has to be fine-tuned along the way. It might not be right off the top. So to have the ability to fine-tune that from the app versus having to run up and down a ladder really is a very nice feature. And then of course the networking of the devices, that is a very key point of something that you don't necessarily want to have to walk from device to device, but to be able to do that all from the app itself is a nice feature. And then one of the nicest things that this app does is it not only allows you to set the sensitivities, but it does allow you to set scheduling. And not only set scheduling, but then make changes to the scheduling using a very user-friendly app on a very user-friendly device that everybody's familiar with, being at either their smartphone or smart tablet, but to make those changes as needed. And then one of the nicest features of this product offering is not only the ability to make these changes, but to make those changes and save them as templates. One of the things that we're seeing more and more is that contractors and specifiers and lighting designers are starting to standardize on set sequences of operation. And as such, those sequence of operations can then be programmed into the device using the Smart Sensor app, and then all they need to be is simply uploaded into the device. Ultimately, where we see the device shining though is its ability to connect with up to 5 additional smart sensor devices or smart sensor room controllers. This expands the field of view all the way up to 10,000 square feet, and the app is really what allows you then to make quick adjustments to that overall networked that has been set up with all of those devices. And then with regards to the stations, well, we need to make sure that we make the stations available for various locations within the space. And as such, we saw the importance of needing to have a wireless manual switching as well as dimming control. Not just the wireless, but yes, there will be applications where wired is necessary, and we do have those. And then finally, the additional, as I mentioned, the additional manual control options that are available for with low voltage keypads, where the individual or the customer may decide they don't want the battery wireless, they truly want to get wire between the devices, and then as such the wired low voltage switches, being at a single button, a 2-button, or a 4-button application, are available. With regards to daylight harvesting, you might think, wow, this sensor is great, and I'd want to place it in the middle of the room where I would get the true benefits of the field of view. Well, you might say also, wait a second though, how can the daylight harvesting sensor properly pick up the daylighting if it's not located within the daylighting zone? As we developed this solution, one of the features that we were able to include was a light pipe. Now, the light pipe that's installed in the smart room controller, as well as the ceiling mounted sensor, is a flat light pipe. However, within the box we also include an angled light pipe. The way that angled light pipe works is you can actually put it in as you mount the sensor in the middle of the room, and then turn the angled portion of the light pipe so it actually looks down into the daylighting zone. Now, this will allow you to properly measure the daylighting, natural light that's coming into the space when the sensor is not mounted directly in that particular part of the room. Now, the light pipe accomplishes a couple of different things. The light pipe allows you to use the sensor in either open loop or closed loop applications. In open loop applications, we would tend to mount the sensor in the room in a way that would allow us to install the angled light pipe, where the angled light pipe will now actually not be looking at the floor of the actual room and give you the total of the natural light and then the artificial light. What the angled light pipe will do as it's looking out the window is operate in an open loop manner, which will allow the sensor to adjust to the actual ambient light that is coming in through the window or other opening within the space. However, in most applications, we have seen that the smart room controller, as well as the ceiling mounted sensor, are installed and operate in the closed loop manner for daylight harvesting. With closed loop, it uses the light pipe to actually measure the combined luminance of the natural light coming in, as well as the artificial light that's being provided by the fixtures within the space. The sensor can then adjust the light levels of the fixtures within the space, where it's merely supplementing the light that is required within the room based on the natural light that is coming in. And in those applications, the natural light becomes the primary light source during the normal daytime hours. And then, of course, during the nighttime hours or on darker days, the artificial light fixtures will supplement as needed to maintain the light level that is desired within the space. As we've discussed the various solutions for the interior areas utilizing the smart sensor technologies, specifically those that work with the smart sensor app, we've pretty much covered the interior areas with the smart Wallbox sensor utilizing a technology that with the multi-tack that we can pretty much cover most areas up to 1,000 square feet, 1,100 square feet as the coverage field of view is specified on the data sheets. Probably the ideal installation would be, rooms that are 500 square feet or less, due to the inability to have true daylight harvesting, simply having the hold off feature on that one. As we also can then expand into the smart ceiling sensor or smart room controller application, covering pretty much, as we discussed, everything up to 10,000 square feet, utilizing the ability to pair up to 5 of the devices together in those applications. So pretty much done a great job of covering the majority of the interior spaces. But what do we do now for the warehouse areas or the outdoor areas, where we might have, a warehouse with fixtures all the way up to 40 foot, high, can we actually accomplish something for that using our smart sensor? Because, to make adjustments on those, you got to get a scissor lift out or some other method to get all the way up there to the 40 foot high fixture mounting position, or even on parking lot lights. What benefits we can have. And I think our product management team has done a tremendous job in expanding our smart sensor solution to not just the interior spaces of offices and areas like that, but also into the warehouse area and the outdoor area or parking lot area or other outdoor areas using our smart IP66 rated passive infrared integrated fixture mount sensor. Now you'd say, well, what is the difference? Well, our product management team has been able to develop a solution, again, for warehouse areas as well as outdoor environments that will allow you to also use that same exact smart sensor app to control the warehouse lighting. Now you say, well, what's the deal on that? Well, we have a fixture mounted solution where the sensor is mounted within the fixture, as well as the exact same device, but that can be mounted on the 1/2 inch knockout of a given junction box or a given fixture. And these will come with lenses that not only work at the lower levels, say a medium range for 8 to 20 feet, but all the way up to 40 feet, another lens, as well as the aisle masks. And these allow you to maintain the full code requirements utilizing that exact same smart sensor app. You might say, well, John, what are some of those requirements, those code requirements that we'd have for a warehouse? Well, one of the things for a given warehouse is that you have to be able to control the lights in a given aisleway as an independent zone of the other areas. One of the nice features of the fixture mounted sensor is that we can pair multiple sensors together. In fact, we can pair a mesh network of up to 16 of these sensors together in a given area. So let's say if we have an aisleway and it has 8 sensors in it. Well, we can pair those 8 sensors together in a way that as soon as you trigger the first one, it turns the other ones on. But how about scheduling? What if you're interested in doing not just switching, but scheduling? Well, one of the nice features of this particular solution is that it allows the code compliant ability to set a schedule on one of the devices. The other devices then become slaves to the schedule that was put into that first area. So let's look at the code application of that. We might have one row that has 8 sensors. We might have another row that has 4 sensors. We might have another row that has 10 sensors. You would merely pair those individual sensors in those individual rows together as groups. And again, only one of them would require that scheduling feature. How about daylight harvesting? Well, the warehouse areas will have the applications where you will require the daylight harvesting if they have skylights, and that is also integrated into these smart sensors. So again, a very simple solution, but the key to this is it does work with the same smart sensor app to program the fixture. What does that mean? Well, that means the warehouse lighting also has the ability to have partial off or even the partial on. ability, which truly expands your abilities and really gives you a full-featured solution to meet all of the requirements that the code would require in a given warehouse environment or other area on your project that might have fixtures mounted at a higher level than we would find in other office areas. With regards to outdoor lighting, say parking lot fixtures or wall packs or other fixtures that are mounted in an outdoor environment, well, these IP66 rated sensors can be, again, either mounted into the fixtures or onto the junction boxes, and as such meet all the code requirements, maintaining the use of the exact same Smart Sensor app. You say, well, what would the code requirements be in the parking lot area? Well, again, most of the codes will allow you, Title 24, as well as some of the other codes, will allow you to pair up to 1,500 watts of lighting together as a common zone. So you can pair up to 16 of these devices on individual fixtures and again be able to respond to a common schedule that is in one of them and have all of these lights turn on at the correct time as well as turn off at the correct time. But then with the scheduling feature, you can go above and beyond that. One of the requirements that most of the codes have is the requirement to actually not only schedule when lighting would turn on in the outdoor environments, but also the ability to change levels of the lighting throughout the nighttime period. I mean, specifically with Title 24, it has the actual verbiage within the code that states must have a minimum of 2 nighttime periods. So what that means is at different times of the night you have to actually adjust the light level. And what we have found even in some of the other codes is that same requirement but maybe worded a little bit differently. So what the Smart Sensor app will allow you to do is to schedule what level those lights go to at what time of the night. And again, you might find that, say, from sunset to midnight, a certain light level is preferable. But once you get to midnight, you can actually drop it down maybe to a 30% level because all that you're trying to do at that point is maintain minimal foot level requirements so that you're actually allowing for the people to have the required egress lighting as they're moving through the space, whether it be on foot or in a vehicle. All in all, this Smart Sensor app is a really great solution because, as we showed you, our product management team has been able to develop solutions, be it the small office area, the larger office area all the way up to 10,000 square feet, the warehouse area, or even the outdoor environment, all the way up to parking lot fixtures, using the same technologies packaged in different ways, but ultimately giving you the same feature set, but more importantly, allowing you to set up that whole system using our Smart Sensor app. So what we have here truly is a completely code compliant solution for any of the big 3 energy codes, being it ASHRAE 90.1, the International Energy Conservation Code, or Title 24 Part 6 in California. We really want to thank you for the opportunity to review the various components that make up our smart sensing solution, but more importantly, giving us the opportunity to discuss the letter of the law as well as the intent behind the energy codes that all of you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis as you work to design lighting control solutions that not only meet code compliance but actually make sense. And I think as we've reviewed all of these components, the glue that it holds them all together is really the Smart Sensor app. The Smart Sensor app really does a great job of allowing you to properly set up your system to meet the sequence of operation requirements that are set up either by the contractor, by the lighting designer, or maybe even the specifier that has that opportunity to really put down on paper or put down in some type of a format that allows the programmer of the system to set it up in a way that allows that space to meet the requirements of the end user that will be utilizing that space. And then, of course, more importantly, I think, not just to set up, but then to easily make adjustments to that, be it the sensitivity settings, be it the timeouts, or scheduling of any part of that system in a way that will allow that space to not only be used as the initial requirements, but to grow with that space and to be adjusted to meet the ongoing changes that that space might need to accommodate. So once again, we thank you for the opportunity to discuss these components as well as the energy code solutions, and we invite you also to give us the opportunity to review your plans with you and be not only a solution provider but also a partner as we move forward to meet what these energy codes are requiring us to do.